Hello and welcome to another episode of Lean Business Agility. Today from the London Lean Campaign Days in, surprise, surprise, London. And with me is Karl Scotland. Hi Karl.
Hi Klaus.
Today we want to talk about strategy deployment, right?
That's what I want to talk about.
I think a very good question is, what is strategy deployment?
So I think a strategy deployment as problem solving where the solutions emerge from the people closest to the problem. So when we're going through transformation, organizational change, rather than assuming that the managers, the most experienced senior people know all the answers and just put a plan together and people just execute on those plans. What we want people to do is be clear about what needs we want to meet, what challenges we have, what opportunities we want to take, communicate that in a way that then people can go off and make decisions about what are the best ways, what things should we try, which are going to solve those problems. So, and the people that have the most information to do that, the people closest to the work.
Okay, so that sounds great. The question is, how can we do this? So I heard now it's not top management who's defining the strategy and who's pushing the strategy into the company, kind of. So how does this work?
Well, they're still defining strategy. So the first thing is what is strategy? How do we define strategy and strategic intent? So a model I really like there is Richard Reynolds' model from his book Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and he says the kind of the three tests you can use, or the test of three things for a strategy is there a clear diagnosis of the current situation? So first off is situation assessment, situational awareness. Where are we now? What problems do we need to solve, or what opportunities do we need to take? Then we need to have some guiding policies about how we go about that. So that's the second element, guiding policies, which is really how do we decide what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And then the key bit that usually people slip up on is having some way of deciding what not to do. And it's kind of a one way I test strategy, or kind of get people to think about strategy, is can you identify something you're not going to do because of these guiding policies? And then the third piece is coherent action. So what will we do which is coherent with our guiding policies, which is going to address the things we discovered in the diagnosis. But we want the coherent action to come from the people doing the work. It's not just something that's imposed top down. So when we're making decisions around what work do we do, we should be able to be clear about what the contribution of any piece of work is towards the strategy. And the other piece that I like to talk about is what evidence are we going to look for that our strategy is working. So even when we're kind of picking up these big pieces of work which we think is strategic, it's all hypothesis. So to me, strategy is scientific, and again, this is something Richard Reynolds talks about. So even our strategy is a hypothesis.
Yes.
We think this is the right approach, and then we're going to go off and we're going to make some investments and do some tactical or operational work. We need to have some clear way of deciding whether that's working or not.
When we talk about strategy, I think there's two things that are kind of important. The first thing is there is the strategy, so how can we operationalize it? So make sure that all the work in the organization is aligned to the strategy. And the second thing is, if we are working on the strategy, we hopefully get smarter.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some kind of feedback loop, which basically, somehow adapts our strategy again. How would you tackle this in real life?
So the first bit, in terms of making sure everything's aligned, is I like to use a format framework called the X Matrix. It's just another flavor of A3. So single piece of paper where we can visualize and communicate and collaborate around what are we doing, why are we doing it, how do we know whether it's working or not, ultimately what are our aspirations. So some clarity around that. And out of that, we're going to generate or decide that here's some things which are coherent with our strategy that we're going to operationalize. So we put a team together, we create an operational team to form some work, and people are going to go off and do that. One idea that I like to keep that alignment and start getting some feedback is what Bungay talks about, Stephen Bungay in his book Art of Action, is back briefing. So effectively what we're doing when we start to operationalize is give people a brief. This is what I'd like you to do. And what we need to make sure is that when people take that brief, they've understood it. So just because we've described what we want to do doesn't mean that they hear what we said. They might hear something completely different. So the idea of back briefing is them describing back to you what problem they think they're trying to solve and what their goals are in solving that problem, how solving that problem helps the biggest business. So that, what's their intent and what's the higher intent. So almost how does this piece of work help my manager meet his goals? And then we can start talking about, and here's the people, skills, resources that we need, freedoms and constraints. So what can we do, what can't we do, and what are our kind of next level of hypotheses? So what things are we going to go and try? So you can do that on an A3. It's all about the conversation. So a lot of the alignment is, there's a quote I like where the alignment doesn't come from the piece of paper, it comes from the conversations. It's all about having the conversations and getting that feedback that way. And then we go in and we start operationalizing and we start running small experiments and tactics. So we need then the feedback from the learning, what we learn from those experiments, which means we need to have some way of understanding what is working and what's not working. So what evidence are we going to look for? We should hopefully, if we've got some kind of dashboard or KPIs, whatever we want to call them, we should be able to say, well, we think this thing will increase or this thing will decrease if our strategy is working.
If I take a look at the board, we are not done when development is over, but we need to somehow measure our success and then maybe adapt the way some validation is going on.
Yeah. So a piece of work at the end is, well, even just not at the end. I mean, I think you're tracking it all the way through. Yeah. So I like to have a cadence in place where we're constantly looking at the evidence, and is the evidence telling us that we're thinking what's working, and then we can have conversations around, are we doing the right thing? Is there anything we should start doing instead? Is there anything that we started doing which we should stop doing? So we might actually decide that there's a piece of work on a kind of strategic portfolio Kanban that we're just going to discard because actually what we're learning is it's not having any impact strategically on the organization.
What can our viewers do to put these ideas into practice?
So I have a model that, and I guess an internal model that I tend to have in the back of my mind when I start talking to organizations about this, which I call TASTE, T-A-S-T-E. So first off, what's your true north? Because actually strategy is about heading in a certain direction. So do we know what that direction is? Do we have that North Star, which is going to effectively is the ultimate guide of what we're doing? And our aspirations, so the A bit is aspirations. How are we going to measure success or define success? When we get to the end of the year and we look back on how well things have gone, what sort of things are we going to look for that's going to help us understand success? And those things are typically, I think, economic. It's around number of customers, number of transactions, whatever, depending on what your business is. And then what's your strategy? So what do you need to do, focus on to achieve those aspirations? And then what are your tactics? What are you actually going to invest in? What experiments are you going to run? And then what evidence are you going to look for? So having those 5 pieces, true north, aspiration, strategy, tactics, evidence, and being able to fit them together in a coherent manner, you kind of think about it, you should be able to tell a story of how all those things fit together. That's a good step in the right direction. Often people just have kind of a few bits of those, and in the worst case they're just doing stuff. It's just all tactical with no real understanding about why we're doing this, how do we know whether it's working, ultimately what are we trying to achieve.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much, Karl.
Thank you.
So we are in London. I need fish and chips.
Okay, you want to go to Brighton then?
Okay.
So.
All right. We will find a decent fish and chips place here.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you and cheers.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.